For today's podcast, I want us to look at the book of Nehemiah. And while we're looking at the book of Nehemiah, we are going to make some connections to Esther and to Ezra. First off, the book of Nehemiah was probably written by Ezra, and there's some reasons for that, and we'll get into that in a second. And towards the end, I'll make some ties into Queen Esther. If you remember, with Esther, we focused on the idea or concept that when our moment comes, we need to make use of that moment. And sometimes we find ourselves in a difficult place, and we have to know and understand that perhaps this was the moment that I am here for. And so as we're looking at Nehemiah, Nehemiah was the cupbearer of the king in Persia. And while he was the cupbearer of the king in Persia, some of his Jewish brothers and sisters and family and his people basically had gone back to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. The king of Persia had allowed the people to go back. And while Nehemiah was serving the king one day, he comes in, and the king noticed that he just looked like something was bothering him, and so he asked. So this is more than just a servant relationship. This is someone who the king noticed something was up and said, "Hey, what's going on?" And he felt comfortable enough to have that conversation with the king. And he said, "It's just taking too long to build the temple, build the walls around Jerusalem. It's like 2 steps forward, 5 steps backwards. And I'm just really worried about my people." And so he's talking more with the king. And so he asked the king, "Can I go back and help?" And the king says yes. And so he goes back to help, and he goes back, and he's just appalled at how in 100 years, very little progress at making the reparation. So he must have been that type of personality that's like, "Dude, you got this job to do it, you know." So as it turns out, Nehemiah becomes the governor of the area, and Ezra is the priest. And so the two of them together begin to work. Now, we already know that Ezra was never married and never had any children. And we highly suspect that Nehemiah, as being um, a close servant of the king, and probably, the male servants of the king that were in and out of the king's presence, likely when his wives were around, more than likely would have been eunuchs, because that was typically what was done with the male servants and slaves, so that they were more free to move around, the males and females in the area. So he likely was a eunuch. We don't know that, but he likely was. In either case, Nehemiah also was neither married and had no children. And so Nehemiah, like Ezra, was a little harsh with the people. That could be because of their situations. Uh, it also could have been because Ezra, as the priest, began to teach the laws of Moses to Nehemiah. Now, remember, if you haven't watched the podcast on Ezra, you might want to pop back and do that. But Ezra was too harsh, too critical, um, very proud of the fact that he knew all of the laws of Moses. And so he really was a stickler for those laws, and very, very harsh and mean to the people. His form of justice did not include mercy. And we've had podcasts also where we've talked about um, um, justice without mercy is just plain mean. And, and we have to understand and apply grace to others, just like God applies grace to us. So when we're looking at Nehemiah, Nehemiah was very harsh and unforgiving to the people. But one thing that was true, when he arrived in Jerusalem to look at the walls, he built a plan, and those walls were built in 52 days. Now, that seems like a very, very, very short amount of time to get things done, especially since they didn't have all the technology and equipment that we have today. But those walls were done in 52 days. He wasn't taking no guff and no excuses. We've got a job to do. We're going to get it done. And so Nehemiah continued to go back and forth uh, to the king in Jerusalem and travel back and forth. Even though he was appointed governor, he still considered himself in the service of the king, and so he would go back and forth. And when he would be spending his time back with the king in Persia, he would see that why are things not moving while I'm gone? So he found that when he was not there in Jerusalem, they didn't get as much done. So he was not very, very pleased with that. So when we're looking at the story of Nehemiah, once again, we have a story like that with Queen Esther. Nehemiah had a moment in time, and he was able to be used for his moment when it came up, because he already was trusted, an honorable person, someone who could be counted on. He was a person that the king noticed, hey, something's bothering you. What's bothering you, Nehemiah? And so Nehemiah told him. And then Nehemiah's moment was, hey, Nehemiah is the person who can get these group of tagalongs, or whatever you want to call them, in the vagabonds in Jerusalem, to come on, guys, let's get to work. We've got a job to do. Get it done. Get it done. And he was the right person to get it done. But he was only able to do that because when his moment in time came, he had lived his life worthy of the calling that was going to be placed upon him. Had he not been an honorable, trustworthy person, when he asked the king, hey, can I go back and help? The king, if the king had any idea that no, he's not going to come back, or he's just trying to get away from here, then the king would have said no. So the message to be learned from Nehemiah is, just like with Queen Esther, it's like when your moment comes, perhaps you were created just for that moment in time. But like Nehemiah, when your moment in time comes, you need to have lived and conducted yourself in society in such a way that you will be ready for that moment. Have you ever been asked to do something, perhaps at church or in a group, and you begin to wonder about, oh, yes, I could do that. But then you think of some of your failings and your mistakes, and maybe some of your very public failings and mistakes, and you find yourself not feeling worthy of that which you've been asked to do. In some of those cases, that's where we accept God's grace and God's mercy and move on. And we think of the story of Jonah, where God used Jonah even while he was in the middle of being disobedient. So, two things to think here. One is your past is your past. You have to move on from that and live in your present and in your future. But the other thing to know and understand is that while we're living in our present, we need to live our present in such a way so that when future moments come up, we haven't done things that make our moment impossible because we've destroyed our reputation or destroyed our grace, because perhaps, like in the Lord's Prayer, forgive us our trespassers, uh, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. That's where grace is. Help us to be merciful and graceful to our neighbors, just like God in heaven has been merciful and graceful to me. So that we are in the place so that when our moment comes, we're able to be used in that moment because we didn't destroy our ability to carry out the call of God. Well, that's my take on Nehemiah. Thank you for watching. See you on the next one. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to Words to Ponder.